Donald Trump upheld his date today with a very old gray lady.
Oh my God,
Trump's on again, off again, on again sit down with the venerable New York Times was in doubt this morning after he fired off a series of tweets, canceling the interview and calling the newspaper failing, nasty, and get ready for this one, quote, not nice. In the end, the incoming president agreed to sit down with about 24 Times journalists, along with the paper's publisher, for an hour and 15-minute, wide-ranging, on-the-record discussion. This is as close to a press conference as we've gotten out of Donald Trump since July 27th, and it did not disappoint. Among the topics that were addressed, Trump seemed to change course on climate change, saying he'd, quote, keep an open mind about the Paris Climate Accord, which he had previously vowed to withdraw from. He also said there is, quote, some connectivity between humans and climate change. Trump was also lukewarm at best on the idea of prosecuting Hillary Clinton for her sins regarding email, whatever those may be, another campaign pledge of Trump's, saying it would be divisive for the country. The incoming president also disavowed groups of white supremacists who have been celebrating his election victory, and he defended his appointment of alt-right figure Steve Bannon as his White House chief strategist, insisting that if he thought Bannon was racist, he, quote, wouldn't even think of hiring him. The topic of Trump's businesses came up amid concerns about conflicts of interest, potential and actual, which the president-elect also dismissed. Trump said he's following the law and that as president, he has more important things to worry about than boosting his bottom line. Trump also fielded questions on several other subjects related to foreign policy, President Obama, Republican leadership, and the media, especially the New York Times, and his cabinet deliberations. So, Nicolle, there is a lot to talk about here, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about it. So what stands out to you from this first semi-hemi-demi press conference?
Other than when you said old gray lady, I went,
yeah, you immediately thought they were talking about you. We were not.
So first, I watched this. I experienced this by following Maggie Haberman's tweets. And this is in and of itself a remarkable new sort of development that Trump is ushering in. This sort of, I think he's the first post-Twitterverse tweeter to be elected president, and to sort of read it as it was going on through was an interesting. I don't know. I mean, as a journalist, what did you think of watching it sort of unfold in real time? In the old days, when George Bush would have reporters in, Elizabeth Buemiller and Dick Stevenson were the White House correspondents. They'd come in, they'd do their interview, and they'd have to go write a story, file it, and then you'd consume it. This was different to me, just as a communications professional, in that we got to experience it in real time without any sort of prioritizing. No one picked a lead. We got to read it as it was happening, and that in and of itself was remarkable.
In some weird way, obviously President-elect Trump has put Twitter at the center of his communication strategy, and in doing it this way, in arranging this this meeting with the Times editors and having kind of a private, behind closed doors press conference, he sort of forced them to use his medium of choice, Twitter, to report on what he was saying rather than using the normal modes of the television camera and broadcast or the website. So that's interesting. It seems to me. I mean, all of these, I would love to see the transcript of the whole thing, because obviously we only really now have snippets. Now there are stories being written off of the snippets. But, I mean, it seems to me that in almost every way, apart from trashing the Times and saying at the outset, basically starting in the way that he apparently started yesterday with network anchors, kind of criticizing them for the way they had treated him unfairly, in every other way, he seemed to be trying to reassure people and turn down the temperature on his rhetoric, and trying the best he can, and he's kind of clumsy about this, but trying to assuage people's worst fears about what's to come.
So I saw the other way, and I guess this is my staff or PTSD. I thought he was turning down the rhetoric to perhaps a universe of voters that didn't support him because of the most extreme parts of his campaign message. But I feel like what he's done the last 2 days with the media was to declare a hot war on his detractors in the media. And I was more interested in that, having sort of stood at the intersection of a president and his relationship with the press. It is to me very interesting that the meeting yesterday, which seemed to have more sort of the bombastic Donald Trump than what we know so far from the New York Times meeting, that seemed to be an escalation. And that's going to cheer a lot of Trump backers, and that might even bring into his fold some Republicans who have harbored a lot of distrust of the mainstream media for a long time. However, I thought that what I read out of the meeting yesterday was almost a chilling warning, a really sort of a shot at his detractors in the media. Back to sort of the bullying of the reporters who were on the trail covering him. I thought it stood in very stark contrast to what he did today with the Times.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you believe that what happened yesterday was the meeting was held, a tantrum was staged in an off-the-record meeting, and then the Trump people leaked it to the New York Post. We had Kellyanne Conway on the show yesterday saying, well, I don't know who would have possibly leaked that story. It was off the record. They should think thrice about it. And it turns out that a lot of people think now it's the Trump transition that leaked it to their favorite newspaper, the New York Post. I agree with you about that, and we're going to talk a lot about some policy matters, but just to stay on the point that you were just talking about, every administration I have covered comes into power and believes that it has mastered a new technological tool, whether it was Bill Clinton with satellite television and others with cable and others with Facebook and with Obama and Facebook. They all think we've found a way around the gatekeepers. We've now found a way to communicate directly to the American people. We will go over their heads, around the side door, underground, whatever. And they all have found out, in my experience, no, you can do that a little bit, but in the end, you still need the mainstream media. Do you think Trump is new in the sense that he will be more successful than his predecessors at browbeating us and browbeating the mainstream media and finding alternative ways to get his message out?
I think he's different because I don't think he's going to arrive at the conclusion that he needs the mainstream media. I think it's so apparent that he wants them. I mean, it is almost like a lover's quarrel, these fights that he has with the mainstream media. And not just the mainstream media, Fox. He wants the legacy outlets to love him. And this is dangerous. And this is the kind of stuff that if a president gets too consumed by his own press, it is very perilous. He won because the voters felt they were hearing directly from him. And if he spends too much time consumed with his image in the media, it's not a good sign.
So Trump, we talked about things that he covered in this pseudo press conference. The one that's getting the most attention right now is about the Clinton not going to investigate her, not going to prosecute her, or whatever. That's at the lead in almost every newspaper in the country. The climate change stuff is also at the top of the leads for a lot of newspapers. Do either one of those things strike you as meaningful or surprising?
Well, everything's meaningful at the beginning because you're really trying to figure out what a president's going to make his top priorities. This idea that he's going to decide that he will not prosecute Hillary Clinton suggests to me that he thinks that he could have or would have. I mean, a president doesn't decide who his Justice Department prosecutes. So this is a riddle to me at this moment. I want to know more. Climate change is interesting because I can't imagine that was a top 3 issue for the kinds of voters that he won over in the final days of the election. I also think that there are areas where you think that Trump has some really dangerous instincts and some worrying instincts. I can't believe that in his heart of hearts, Donald Trump, Manhattanite, sophisticate, and actually an intelligent person, doesn't believe that, in fact, climate change is man-made and that it's a real problem that you have to deal with in some way. He might be worried about the effects on jobs. He might want to renegotiate some treaties, but he's not, I think, someone who's a climate denier in his heart of hearts. I hope not. And I don't know where he was for Sandy. I'm sure even at the top of Trump Tower, the winds blew and he saw that. I'll tell you what I thought from this New York Times meeting was the place where, to me, is now the obvious place. We've been talking about this for a couple days, but the way he answered questions on it today suggests it's going to be a huge problem. He is not taking seriously enough these questions about his business, the conflicts of interest inherent there, the potential unconstitutionality of things that he might want to do, the role of his kids in the business, all of it. He brushed them away, at least on my reading of how he answered the questions by Times reporters. Just brushed them away. Just as he brushed away, I think, he denounced the alt-right, but he brushed it away very cavalierly. I think both of those areas are going to continue to be problems for him until he articulates much more clearly what he thinks about the alt-right and what he's going to do about these massive conflicts of interest that face him. I agree with you, and I think those are 2 issues and 2 areas that threaten to undermine him with his own base, who's looking for a major shakeup of the way politics is normally done. 100% correct.